Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. Today what I'm gonna share with you is something that I noticed on my new 85 Toyota 4Runner Brodozer. I was underneath there changing out an oil pressure sanding unit. I happened to grab a hold of the front drive shaft and I heard this clunk clunk, and I inspected it, noticed that the front U-joint that attaches to the front differential was wasted. I also noticed that the splines of the slip yoke had a lot of play too. So I know that I can replace a U-joint, but if the splines are wasted, I can't do that. A drive shaft shop has to do that. I went to a local place in San Jose. It's called South Bay Driveline. They get very good reviews. They come highly recommended. And I also had a buddy, Mikey, the guy who did the V8 swap. He had some custom drive lines built at South Bay Driveline. I decided to let them take a look at the drive shaft, and they did tell me, yeah, the splines are wasted, it needs to be rebuilt. Steve, the owner of the company, who's been doing it for 30 years plus, he suggested using a heavy-duty trail gear spline and slip assembly. I left them the drive shaft. I just pulled it out right there in their parking lot and left it with them. They did a pretty darn quick turnaround. They got it quickly from trail gear. They cut off the bad splines, and then they welded on the trail gear, and then they put it in their machine and they balanced it for me. Now this trail gear spline and slip is not really meant for highway speeds. They say on the trail gear website you shouldn't go any faster than 50 miles an hour. So it is appropriate you could put it on the front of your rig, because normally you're not going to be turning that drive shaft any faster than 50 miles an hour when you're four-wheeling. At least I don't think I'm ever going to be doing that. It's appropriate to put in the front, but you wouldn't want to put it in the back because it's really not meant for highway speeds. With all that said, let's take a trip down to South Bay Driveline and let's see the work they did for me. Okay, we arrived at South Bay Driveline. There's my sweet rig. Hey look, a 3rd gen 4Runner. Somebody's got good taste. So this is Steve Johnson Jr. His dad, Steve Johnson Sr., was the guy who actually started this business about 30 years ago?
Yeah.
And so these guys have been in business for a long time. They get really good reviews for their work. A lot of people use them, including myself. And now Steve Jr. is going to describe the damage in my drive shaft and the reason why they rebuilt it for me.
So with the spline and slip, there was quite a bit of slop in the splines. Actually able to move it laterally on the U-joint itself, which every quarter revolution is going to drop and cause a kind of knocking noise that you're going to hear. So with the difference in the length in that, we ended up just cutting off the splines, chopped it right here.
Okay.
In the lathe over here.
Okay. So you cut off the old splines and then you welded on the trail gear.
Welded on the trail gear with our welder over here. You see our associate Miguel over here setting up another one to go. So we got our welder and our standard settings that we use. Got a semi-automatic welder, so it's all set up in its stand, and the only thing I have to do is worry about the timing and the speed that I need to go for the weld as I control it.
Okay, very cool. Right on. So here's the drive shaft that they rebuilt for me. This new section right here is the trail gear section. I'm gonna let Steve describe this trail gear spline and slip assembly, all the benefits and how they welded it together and balanced it.
So with the spline and slip assembly, you got a nice solid spline and a very thick slip. So it ends up having a lot more strength than a skinnier one. It's really good because it can take a lot of abuse. So with here we got our standard weld, and then there's actually one of our balancing weights that we had to do on there.
Steve told me that this is a yoke that doesn't have a Zerk fitting to it, so when it's time to service it, you would disconnect it from the front differential. Before you slide it off, you would make match marks so you get it back in the same orientation, because this is balanced now, and then you would pack some grease in here and you would slide it back together. And they painted it for me too, so it's nice and painted. Okay, I'm back home from South Bay Driveline, and Steve Jr. gave me the old spline and slip so I can have it as a souvenir basically. And what I'd like to do is show you a little bit better the play that was in the splines and the play that was in the U-joint. So as Steve Jr. said, they put the drive shaft in a lathe and they cut off this spline and slip assembly. If it was just a U-joint replacement, I could have done that myself, but the splines have a lot of play and I wanted to show it better. So you see all that play in the slip. So that's up and down, and let me go side to side. So this is what made me decide that, hey, I need to rebuild this drive shaft. This is really not good to keep as is, because I don't want a failure if I could avoid it out four-wheeling, out in BFE. Now, like I said, if it was just a simple fact of replacing a U-joint, I could have done this. You could see the play. You could hear it up and down and side to side. So there's play in all sides of this U-joint. So let's examine this drive shaft, spline, and slip assembly. Normally right here you have a Zerk fitting. The Zerk fitting obviously broke off when the guy was four-wheeling. When you're servicing your drive shaft, you're greasing all the Zerk fittings for the U-joints, but you're also greasing the Zerk fitting for the slip yoke. This Zerk fitting is all the way at the bottom of where this spline slides in and out of. The problem with this type of design is that pretty much all the grease is near the bottom, and unless you just pump it till your heart's content and just pump it full of grease, you're really not going to get the grease all the way up into the splines. Normally there's a cap at the end of the yoke here, but it's missing, so this won't even work for me to fill it up anyways because the cap is missing. But it's my belief, and I also asked the guys at South Bay Driveline what they think about the effectiveness of using this Zerk fitting to grease the splines, and they confirmed with me my suspicion that this does a very poor job of lubricating the splines because this spline is very, very long. So if you did the normal routine of servicing your drive shaft, greasing all the Zerk fittings, and say you went ahead and just really pumped this up with as much grease as possible to where you actually saw the spline start to squeeze out a little bit. All the grease is down here and it's really not up here. You see how long these splines are. If you really think that the grease is going to make its way all the way up to the upper part of these splines, it's really not gonna. What they suggest, and what I actually showed in a video for the rear drive shaft on my 3rd gen, is that it's actually better just to disconnect the drive shaft from the differential. You make match marks so you get it in the same orientation because it's balanced as a unit, so you want to get it back in the same spot. And then you would pull this out, you would pack grease inside of here, get it nice and full of grease, and then you slide it back together, and maybe you even put a little grease on here. That's the best way to properly lubricate this spline and slip assembly. So just something to note. Don't think that you're going to get this thing lubricated really well just by pumping a few pumps into this rear Zerk fitting. So in closing, if you live in the Bay Area or are close by, you don't have to drive too far, I really highly recommend using South Bay Driveline for your drive shaft needs because these guys really know what they're doing. It's obvious from how busy they are and how many positive reviews they get, and the fact that they do work for a competitive price and their work is outstanding, and they're nice guys. I met the dad and I met the son, and they are pretty cool guys. They're very approachable and they answered all my questions that I had. You might be thinking, well, Timmy, why didn't you use an online supplier? Because there's companies that do custom drive shaft work online. There's something to be said by being able to go to a local company, support a local company, number one, and then to be able to talk to the guys there right in person, tell them what the issues you're having with your drive shaft, and let them right in person give you options of how to fix the problem. So even if you could save a few bucks potentially online, there's a lot to be said to being able to go right to a brick and mortar place and get your drive shaft fixed in a quick manner and done well. With all that said, we thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. We'll be back with more videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you have any questions or comments, do that below. Take care. Bye-bye. Sick mods and sick bro dozers.